the author, he said, وَلَا تُنَادِهِ بِاسْمِهِ مُجَرَّدًا, and do not address your teacher by his name. So if the name of the Shaykh is Muhammad, we don't say, "Oh Muhammad, what's the answer to this question?" Or call out to him, "Oh Muhammad, come over here." This is su' al-adab. Rather, we use the correct laqab when it comes to the teacher. We say Shaykhana, our teacher, Ustadhana, our Ustadh, etc. And do not say just the laqab. Yani even don't say Ya Shaykh Fulan, O Shaykh Muhammad. Even this is considered su' al-adab. Rather, as I mentioned, قُلْ يَا شَيْخِي, O my Shaykh, or Ya Shaykhana, or Ya Ustadhi, Ya Ustadhana. Don't say O Shaykh or O Shaykh Muhammad. وَلَا تُسَمِّهِ, and do not mention his name. فَإِنَّهُ أَرْفَعُ فِي الْأَدَبِ, because this is more elevated in terms of adab. Meaning that your respect of your teacher or your Shaykh is so high that you don't like to mention his name. Like your fathers, it's not correct for a person to call out to his father using his name. And like this when it comes to the teacher.
العلم قال الله قال رسوله قال الصحابة هم أولو العرفان ما الدين نصبك للخلاف سفاهة بين الرسول وبين قول فلان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولي الأولين والآخرين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. أيها الإخوة, we continue in our reading and benefiting from this beautiful risala entitled Ḥilyat Ṭālib al-ʿIlm, the adornments of the student of knowledge, authored by Shaykh al-Allama Bakr Abu Zayd rahimahullah rahmatan wasi'ah. And this lesson today takes place on the 14th of Dhul Hijjah, 1445 years after the blessed hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, corresponding to the 20th of June 2024. And in the previous lesson, the Shaykh rahimahullah, he spoke about the importance of seeking knowledge from a Shaykh, the importance of seeking knowledge from a teacher, and the importance of remaining with a teacher for a long time in order to seek the knowledge. And that knowledge is not sought from books. Rather, the tradition of Islam has been to seek knowledge from or with a teacher. And we mentioned, and the Shaykh also mentions, the benefits of studying with a teacher as opposed to books. Amongst the benefits is that you learn from the akhlaq and the adab of the Shaykh. And this was known at the time of the Salaf, as was mentioned. And also how studying with a teacher saves you a lot of time, because the teacher or the Shaykh does the research and then brings you the summary of the research which he has done. And for each lesson which a person attends, you might not appreciate 4 or 5 hours of research that that scholar or that Shaykh has done. And also how a teacher is able to interact with you, ask you questions, test your understanding, see if anybody is losing focus, give them encouragement. And none of this is there with books. And also how you are able to ask the teacher questions, and you're not able to do that when it comes to books. And how a teacher is able to mold his lesson or his style of teaching depending upon different students. Are they young? Are they older? Are they single? Are they married? Do they have free time? Are they preoccupied? Is the lesson after Fajr? Is the lesson after Isha? So a teacher will look at all of this and try to mold the lesson for the audience, whereas a book is a book. So the asl when it comes to the Islamic tradition of learning is to learn from teachers who have learned from teachers who learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the author, rahimahullah, in the previous lesson, he said that the Salaf would look down upon a person who is sahafiyan or mushafiyan. A sahafiyan meaning somebody who had learnt only from books and did not study with a shaykh or a teacher. A mushafiyan meaning the one who learnt Quran from the mushaf, and he did not learn the Quran, tajweed, tartil from a teacher. And then the author mentioned some of the pitfalls of only learning from books as opposed to studying with a teacher. For example, and some of these applied to the previous days, if a person does not know i'rab, he will misunderstand what the book is intending, what the author intended in the book. If a person does not know how to differentiate between a fa'il and maf'ulun bihi with a dhamma or a fatha, a person will understand incorrectly from the book. Also in the previous days when the books were written by hand, if the handwriting of the author is not very good, then that book is not very useful for you. Similarly, at-tasheef or at-tahrif fil kutub. If previously when the books or Arabic was written without the dots, without the harakat, and a person does not know how to differentiate between the fa and the qaf, and the ta marbuta and the ha, and the ta and the tha and the ba, because there's no dots and there's no harakat. Or if the nusakh, i.e. those who copied the books, if they made a mistake in copying the book, therefore you make a mistake. Similarly, you may not know the madhab of the author or the aqidah of the author, or if he was an innovator, etc. So the author mentioned various pitfalls when it comes to studying only with books. And we mentioned that, of course, when it comes, if it's a necessity, meaning there are no teachers available, there are no scholars available, there are no halaqat, there are no gatherings of knowledge available in your local masjid, then of course you benefit from books. And in our times we can say benefiting from online lessons or recorded lessons. But the asl in Islam is that we study with a teacher. And as for today's lesson, it is al-faslu al-thalith, the third subchapter, Adab al-Talibi ma'a shaykhihi. Adab al-Talib ma'a shaykh. It is the etiquettes of a student with his shaykh. Meaning, how does a student of knowledge, how does a student behave and interact in the presence of his shaykh, of his teacher? Whether it is within the gathering of knowledge or outside the gathering of knowledge. And of course, these adab that the author is going to mention, these are common to every scholar, to every person of knowledge, due to the knowledge which they have. And a part of Islam, a part of Iman, is honoring a person of knowledge, whoever that person of knowledge is, whether it's your teacher or it is not your teacher. So we honor the ulama, we honor the tullab al-ilm, we honor the imams of the masajid, even if we do not know them, even if we have never studied with them. Why? Because they are ulama and they are mashayikh and they are serving their religion. So these adab are shared and common between the ulama in general. However, your shaykh or your teacher then has a more specific right over you because of his virtue over you. And these adab which the author mentions, they have never changed throughout history. Throughout the history of Islam, these adab have always remained constant. And what's the evidence of this? That books have been written from the time of the Salaf to this time today. Books are continue to be written regarding the adab of a student with his shaykh. This shows us that the importance of these adab has never changed, and those adab have remained consistent throughout time. And subhanallah, it's unfortunate, and I speak for myself as well, that some of these adab, we only learnt them, or we only appreciated them and realized them after graduating from the Islamic University of Al-Madinah. And so, some of the rights of our teachers upon us when we were studying, we were not able to fulfill them because we did not know, or we did not realize or appreciate the importance of these adab. So for a person to miss the time frame and the opportunity to interact with his shaykh or his teacher with the adab of Islam is something which a person should feel sorrow over. So the author, rahimahullah, he said, رِعَايَةُ حُرْمَةِ الشَّيْخِ, that you have to consider and pay attention to the hurma of the shaykh. The hurma meaning the sanctity or the honourable nature of the shaykh. He said, بما أن العلم لا يؤخذ ابتداء من الكتب, just as knowledge is not taken from books initially. Like we mentioned previously, that the student of knowledge, when he first begins to seek knowledge, he has to take knowledge from a teacher, and he does not rely on books alone and self-study. So just as you require your teacher to seek knowledge, especially at the beginning, بل لا بد من شيخ تتقن عليه مفاتيح الطلب, in fact you require a shaykh in order to become well versed in the keys of knowledge, لتأمن من العثار والزلل, so you can save yourself from mistakes and pitfalls. فعليك, therefore it is upon you, إذن بالتحلي برعاية حرمته, then it is upon you to pay attention to the honor of your teacher. فإن ذلك عنوان النجاح والفلاح والتحصيل والتوفيق, because this is the key to success and attainment, meaning attaining knowledge, and at-tawfiq. And of course, as we mentioned, how you should view a shaykh is that he is your muallim and he is your murabbi. He is your teacher in terms of knowledge, and he is your murabbi, meaning that he is giving you tarbiyah. And therefore, this shaykh has a right upon you. The right of a muallim, the right of a teacher, and then the right of a murabbi, somebody who is giving tarbiyah regarding adab. And the reality is that you will only benefit from the shaykh according to your level of respect for the shaykh. Because if a student does not have respect for his shaykh, then he's not going to pay much attention to what he is saying and the adab which he is teaching. If the student considers himself to be similar to the shaykh or close to the shaykh, he's not going to benefit from him much. But when we recognize the virtue and the status of our teachers, then we benefit from them. So the author said, فَلْيَكُنْ شَيْخُكَ مَحَلَّ إِجْلَالٍ مِنْكَ وَإِكْرَامٍ وَتَقْدِيرٍ وَتَلَطُّفٍ. So let your shaykh be in a position of ijlal, that you are respecting or respectful of the shaykh. وَإِكْرَامٍ, and you honor the shaykh. وَالتَّقْدِيرٍ, and that teacher or that shaykh has a qadr with you, meaning he has a status and a place in your heart. And also at-talattuf. And the meaning of at-talattuf is interacting with him with al-lutf. Al-lutf meaning generosity and kindness and leniency in how you interact with him, in how you speak with him, etc. So, for example, is it from ikram And is it from at-talattuf, that a person's teacher walks in front of him and the student does not give the teacher salam? We would say this is not from adab. In fact, these adab, they can be applied to the elders of Islam. So some of the adab which are being mentioned here, they apply not only to your shaykh, we said to every scholar, to every imam, also to our fathers, also to the elders in al-Islam, even if we don't know them. But more so when it comes to a person's teacher. And similarly when it comes to, for example, if you and the shaykh are about to enter the masjid, is it from adab that a student ignores the teacher and goes in first? No. Rather, from the adab of Islam is that you allow the shaykh or the teacher to walk in first. Is it from adab of a talib al-ilm that if he meets his shaykh, he waits for the shaykh to give salam, otherwise he's not going to give him salam? Or is the correct adab that he begins by giving the salam out of respect for his shaykh? So these are some of the adab of a talib towards the shaykh. And subhanallah, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, in his explanation of Ḥilyat Ṭālib al-ʿIlm, he said when he spoke about entering into the masjid first, if a shaykh and a student are together, that the student should allow the shaykh to enter into the masjid first. He said, وَأَنَا لَا أُرِيدُ مِن طُلَّابِي أَن يَقِفُوا لِي وَأَدْخُلُوا قَبْلَهُم. He said, as for me, then I don't want my students to stand up for me. And neither do I want from them to allow me to enter first, so I enter first. فَأَنَا أَسْمَحُ بِهِ. I give my permission for my student not to stand up or for the student to enter first. And of course, he's saying this from the angle of at-tawadu, from the angle of humbleness. Otherwise, this is from the rights of the teacher over the student. And just as a Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah said this, and he's a scholar of right, then I don't want anybody to understand that these adab which I'm mentioning are adab or behaviors which I, meaning Abul Abbaas, I expect from anybody who is here. Because wallahi, I don't consider this lesson or this gathering, I don't consider a gathering of teacher and students. I consider it a gathering of brothers who are simply revising with each other. The Shaykh said, وَخُذْ بِمَجَامِعِ الْآدَابِ مَعَ شَيْخِكَ فِي جُلُوسِكَ مَعَهُ. And adorn yourselves with the common etiquettes with your shaykh. These etiquettes, these adab, they are well known. They don't need to be specified, but they are specified because people have forgotten them. Otherwise, the people of Islam, they know the adab that we have with teachers, with elders, with neighbors, with parents. But amongst these adab is how you sit with your shaykh, or how you sit in front of your teacher. So is it from the adab of the gathering of knowledge that we sit and your feet are pointing at the teacher or the shaykh? It's not from correct adab. And if somebody said, but where's the evidence in the Quran that this is not permitted? We're talking from the angle of adab. And these adab are known in our urf. They are known by our culture, by Muslim culture. We're not talking about the culture of the kuffar. We're not talking about the culture of the people of fisq and the people of fasad, but the culture of the ulama and the righteous and the tulab al-ilm and how they used to behave with their teachers. This is where these adab are taken from. And also when it comes to speaking to the teacher, should we speak to our shaykh like we speak with each other as friends? No. Our shaykh deserves more respect. He said, وَحُسْنَ سُؤَالٍ وَالْإِسْتِمَاعِ. And also adab in how you ask questions, and adab in listening attentively to the lesson or the knowledge which the Shaykh is giving. Meaning that when you come to a gathering of knowledge, you place all your focus in listening. And yes, sometimes it becomes difficult, but you have to have some enthusiasm and adab when it comes to the gatherings of knowledge, and also how a question is asked. And from the adab which we learned is that when you ask a question in a gathering of knowledge, you don't ask a question immediately. Rather, you begin by making dua for the teacher. And you will, if you listen to any recording of a lesson where one of the scholars is teaching, when you listen to the question, you will find the student saying, "O our Shaykh, ahsan Allahu ilaykum." May Allah show you goodness, and then this is the question. "O hafizakumullah," may Allah preserve you, and this is the question. "Waffaqakumullah," may Allah give you tawfiq, this is the question. So also from adab of a student towards a teacher is to make dua before asking the question, and then ask the question. He said, وَحُسْنُ الْأَدَبِ في تصفح الكتاب أمامه ومع الكتاب. And also the adab of the student in turning the pages of the book in front of the Shaykh, and in terms of bringing the book. In terms of turning the pages of the book in front of a person's Shaykh or teacher, this shows us the extent of the adab which the Salaf used to have. It's mentioned in the books of adab, and it's narrated from some amongst the Salaf, that the student would be very careful in turning the page of the book in front of the Shaykh, so as not to irritate the Shaykh. Meaning, he wouldn't be turning the page like this, and a noise is being made in front of the Shaykh. And this was the extent of the adab which they had in front of their teachers, that even when it came to turning the page of the book, the page would be turned very quietly, with adab, with ihtiram, with at-tawqir. And some of them, they mentioned that even some of the Salaf, if you were to ask them, describe what your Shaykh looked at like, they would say that I don't know what he looks like. And maybe he studied with him for months and years. Why? Because out of his respect for his Shaykh or his teacher, he wasn't able to stare at his face. This was the level of adab they would have. Then in front of the Shaykh, they would look down, and they would not stare at his face. And this is also narrated from some of the Sahaba regarding the Prophet ﷺ. The amount of respect that they had for him, they would not stare into his face, rather they would look down. And in terms of the book, then bringing the book with you, and then we don't become lazy when it comes to taking notes, having a notepad, bringing a book. And of course, this is different depending upon the gathering. So if it is a general lecture, a general maw'idha, then it is not as important, but still I would say from the adab is that you write down any benefits which the visiting Shaykh or visiting teacher is going to make. But when it comes to halaqat al-ʿilm, where we are learning and studying, memorizing, testing each other, then you don't sit there without a book or without a daftar, a notepad, and you write down benefits on that notebook, because this shows the teacher that you're not here to socialize, but you are here to learn. And some of the mashayikh, they mention that from complete adab is that you don't have the sharh of a book in front of the teacher. Meaning, if the Shaykh is explaining, let's say the Shaykh is explaining the matan al-usul al-thalatha. From complete adab with the Shaykh is that when you sit in front of the Shaykh, if you're going to bring a book, you bring al-usul al-thalatha. And you don't bring an explanation of the book. At home, you benefit from the explanations. You go back, you research them, you read them. But in front of the Shaykh, from adab, is that you bring the book which he is teaching. And then you make benefits according to what the teacher or the Shaykh is saying. He said, وَتَرْكِ التَّطَاوُلِ وَالْمُمَارَاتِ أَمَامَهُ. And also, that a person does not act in a boastful way in front of the teacher. So, when it comes to asking a question, we don't go back and forth with the Shaykh. The Shaykh gives an answer, and then as if you're replying to him. And then he gives another answer, and then you're replying to him. And also boasting in front of the Shaykh. And also from the adab is in how you ask a question. So if you heard your Shaykh give a particular view in the lesson, and then let's say you went home and you heard from another Shaykh the opposing view. You don't come back to the Shaykh and say, what is your view upon the statement of Shaykh Fulan ibn Fulan, because he said this. But you ask a question, you say, Shaykh, last week you gave this view. How do we understand this evidence? How would we reply to somebody who has this view? Naam. As for mentioning a Shaykh's name in an opinion against the view of the Shaykh you are studying with, then this is considered to be su' al-adab. And also, it isn't important to us people. It doesn't matter whether this Shaykh said it or that Shaykh said it. What is important to us are the evidences, and to make sure we've understood the evidence correctly. So the asal is that you take the tarjihat of your teacher according to what he has understood, especially at the beginning steps of seeking knowledge. And then of course, as you progress and you gain more and more knowledge and you research more and you begin to understand evidences, then you may develop a view different from the view of your Shaykh. But in the beginning steps of knowledge, you take the views of your Shaykh, and this is not from the angle of taqleed, this is from the angle of at-tarjih, meaning that Shaykh has also looked at evidences, and this is what has become apparent to him. As for throwing statements of scholars against other statements of scholars, as if there's a competition between them, then this is su' al-adab. And as I mentioned, if you did read something which contradicts what the Shaykh said, then the way you ask the question is, Ya Shaykh, how do we understand the statement of the one who said X, Y, Z, without naming the person who said it? Or how would we reply to this particular evidence? How do we understand this evidence according to what you said in the previous lesson? This is how a question is asked. The author said, وَعَدَمُ التَّقَدُّمِ عَلَيْهِ بِكَلَامٍ أَوْ مَسِيرٍ. And also, not preceding the Shaykh or the teacher with statements, with a sentence, or when you are walking. Meaning, and in basic adab, if your teacher was walking, then you don't cut across the Shaykh, you walk from behind him. This is from complete adab. Or if the teacher is speaking, you don't interrupt what he is saying or the point he is making. Rather, you raise your hands, you ask a question, you seek permission. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin, rahimahullah, he mentions an example that if both of you are walking, yani the student and the Shaykh, and you're going to get your shoes, akramakumullah, both of you getting your shoes, is it correct for the student to cut across the Shaykh and pick his shoes up first? We said this isn't from the adab of how a student behaves with a teacher. You let the teacher walk first, and he picks his shoes up, and then you pick your shoes. Because it symbolizes the student being careless. I don't care if I cut in front of you and pick up my shoes and you're standing behind me. So this negates the adab that a student has with a teacher. And also, if the Shaykh gives an answer or teaches something or makes a point, even if you knew that point already, then you don't make it apparent that you knew that piece of information or that knowledge. Some people, subhanallah, before the Shaykh has even answered the question, he say, yes, I understand. Meaning, I'm symbolizing to you that I don't need all of your knowledge. I don't need you to finish your sentence. I already know what you are saying. All of this is from what? Su' al-adab. And where does this Su' al-adab or bad manners emanate from? That person does not have taqdeer of his teacher. He does not value his teacher. And that teacher has a very low place in his mind and his heart. He said, أو مداخلته في حديثه ودرسه بكلام منك. And similarly interrupting the teacher while he's speaking or in his lesson. أو الإلحاح عليه في جواب. And similarly not pestering the teacher when it comes to asking questions. So always paying attention to the mood of the Shaykh. Is it possible that he is tired? Is it possible that he needs to leave? Is it possible that he is distracted? Is it possible that he's trying to give time to other people who might be more important? So for example, it might be a case that two people ask a question and the Shaykh prefers and answers one particular question. Why? Because of the questioners. So this questioner is always in the masjid, he's always around him, he's from the community of the masjid. This questioner has traveled from far away and he might not attend again. This questioner, he's upon the Sunnah. This questioner is far away from the Sunnah, therefore is requiring of more attention. So always paying attention to the needs of the Shaykh or the moods of the Shaykh or any qara'in, any other external factors which require you not to pester the Shaykh for an answer then and there. Perhaps, and this often you find from the ulama, you ask them a question and they give an answer which you consider to be ambiguous. You think it is ambiguous. And then subhanallah, when you grow up and you gain in your understanding, then you understood why that Shaykh gave an ambiguous answer. Why he did not specify the answer which you wanted. Maybe he was trying to teach you something or encouraging you to do research. Or maybe that question at that situation in front of those people did not require detailed answers. Sometimes, because of who is sitting there, a teacher may not be able to give a detailed answer. There might be children, there might be sisters who are listening, his own wife or sister or his own mother may be listening next in the women's hall, and therefore he cannot go into specifics, especially sometimes things relating to hygiene and other things. The wordings which are used, they might be ambiguous. Why? Because of external factors. So all of these things, a talib from his adab, he bears in mind. The author, he said, وَلَا تُنَادِهِ بِاسْمِهِ مُجَرَّدًا. And do not address your teacher by his name. So if the name of the Shaykh is Muhammad, we don't say, "Oh Muhammad, what's the answer to this question?" Or call out to him, "Oh Muhammad, come over here." This is Su' al-adab. Rather we use the correct laqab when it comes to the teacher. We say Shaykhana, our teacher, Ustadhana, our Ustadh, etc. And do not say just the laqab. Even don't say Ya Shaykh Fulan, O Shaykh Muhammad. Even this is considered Su' al-adab. Rather, as I mentioned, Qul Ya Shaykhi, O my Shaykh, or Ya Shaykhana, or Ya Ustadhi, Ya Ustadhana. Don't say O Shaykh, or O Shaykh Muhammad. وَلَا تُسَمِّهِ. And do not mention his name. فَإِنَّهُ أَرْفَعُ فِي الْأَدَبِ. Because this is more elevated in terms of adab. Meaning that your respect of your teacher or your Shaykh is so high that you don't like to mention his name. like your fathers. It's not correct for a person to call out to his father using his name. And like this when it comes to the teacher. وَلَا تُخَاطِبْهُ بِتَاءِ الْخِطَابِ. And do not address the teacher with a singular pronoun. Now, meaning, we don't say to our shaykh, أَنْتَ قُلْتَ فِي الدَّرْسِ. You said in the lesson. Rather we say, أَنْتُمْ قُلْتُمْ فِي الدَّرْسِ. That you, plural, you mentioned in the dars. And of course, the pronoun of respect, it is non-existent in the English language, because the English language is not a language of adab. Whereas if you look into Arabic and Persian and Urdu, you will see and you will notice that when we speak to our fathers, when we speak to our teachers, we always use the plural of respect. We never address them with a singular pronoun. And all of this is from taqdeer. And subhanAllah, I remember when we were at school, and some of the brothers will remember this, that if we were asked to write something, let's say write a story about what you did with your parents or your family on the weekend, and we were speaking about our dad, we would say, and then they said to us, and then we asked them, and we're speaking about our father, one person, and the English teacher would not understand. What do you mean they said? It's a he said. But our Islam and our urf, our culture taught us that no, when we speak to our father or regarding our father, we say they said, and our father, etc. We don't use the singular pronoun. أو تناديه من بعد من غير اضطرار. And also from the adab of a student with the shaykh is that you don't shout out to the shaykh from far away. And we don't scream, "Oi, ya shaykh," no. Unless it's اضطرار. If it's a darura, for example, if there was some danger, then you shout out to the shaykh. Even if you, in situation of a danger, you call him out by his name to draw his attention, that is darura. But normally, we don't shout out to the shaykh from across the road, from across the masjid. Rather, we have adab and we approach the shaykh. And from the Salaf, in fact, even from some of the Sahaba, we find them referring to their fathers by first name. And in various hadith of Ibn Umar, he will say, Ibn Umar, meaning Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, Abdullah the son of Umar. He said, Qala Umar. Umar said. Who's Umar? His father. So how is it possible that we're saying don't address and call out to your father using his name? And then we find some of the Sahaba referring to their fathers by name, Qala Umar. And the scholars, they differentiate between Bab al-Khitab and Bab al-Khabar. So when Ibn Umar said regarding Umar, that Umar said, he was not addressing him. He was not calling out to him. Rather, he was informing that this is what his father Umar radiallahu anhu said. So when it comes to Bab al-Khabar, we can say that Fulan mentioning his name said. Even if we were to say that it would be better in terms of adab to not mention his name, showing your respect for him. But when it comes to khitab, when it comes to addressing the shaykh, then we don't address him by his name, just as we do not address our fathers by their names. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, it's narrated that he saw a younger man walking in front of an older man. And he asked the younger man, who is this person? And he said, he's my father. He said to him, لا تمشي أمامه ولا تناديه باسمه. Do not walk in front of your father, and do not address your father using his first name. So from the adab of the son towards his father, he walks behind his father. And he allows his father to enter the room first. And he allows his father to sit down first. and he allows his father to begin eating first. And then when he addresses his father, then he uses those terms, yani those alqab, which are appropriate between a father and a son. And even in terms of, I often have to tell this to some of the younger students, and wallah, it's shameful. In reality, it's shameful that the parents have not taught this to their children. And I've heard this multiple times. They will phone their father and their mother, first thing, Dad, where are you? Now, not even Assalamu alaikum. Not even Abba or Baba, how are you doing? Now I'm straight away, Dad, where are you? Dad, when are you coming? Dad, I'm waiting for you. And all of this is qillatul adab. Begin with salam, ask him how he is, make dua for him, and then whatever need that a person needs to have. A person enters the room, Mum, where's the food? Without salam, without ummi, without how's your day been? Do you need any help? What can I do? Where's the food? All of this is qillatul adab. And subhanallah, in the previous days, these adab would be taught not in the masajid. They would be taught by the parents and the uncles and the grandparents. And the young boy, the young girl would see these adab. He would see his own parents, his own uncles, his older brothers displaying these adab with those who are older. But then, when we began to live in these times and these societies, these adab have now disappeared, such that they need to be taught in these books. The author, rahimahullah, he said, وانظر ما ذكره الله تعالى من الدلالة على الأدب مع المعلم الناس الخير في قوله عز وجل لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. Allah Azza wa Jal, he said, with regards to the Sahaba interacting with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, and do not make how you address the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, how you address each other. How you call out to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, how you address him should not be how you speak with your friends and call out to your mates, using nicknames, using shortened names, loving names, but this is with regards to friends. As for the Shaykh, we don't use nicknames or shortened names or names without the relevant title and without a dua. He said, rahimahullah, وَكَمَا لَا يَلِيقُ أَن تَقُولَ لِوَالِدِكَ ذِي الْأُبُوَّةِ الطِّينِيَّةِ يَا فُلَانِ أو يَا وَالِدِي فُلَانِ فَلَا يَجْمُلُ بِكَ مَعَ شَيْخِكَ. He said, just as you would not refer to your father, and he is your father who has a relationship to you in terms of biology, meaning he's your biological father. You will not say to him, oh so and so. If your father was called Abdullah, you don't call out to your father saying, oh Abdullah. Naam, you say, oh my father. In fact, you do not even say, Ya walidi fulan. You don't say, oh my father Abdullah. You say, oh my father. Then similarly, it is not befitting for you to address your Shaykh using his name or even, oh Shaykh fulan. Rather, our Shaykh, my Shaykh, Ustaduna, Ya Ustadi, etc. And this is because a person's teacher is like the status of his father. And a person has two fathers. His biological father, and then his Shaykh or his teacher is also like his father. Why? What is the role of the father? The role of the father is at-ta'lim wa-tarbiyah. He teaches his children and he cultivates his children. He disciplines his children with adab. Your biological father does this, and also your muallim, your teacher, is also doing this. And this is why in the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, إِنَّمَا أَنَا بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْوَالِدِ أُعَلِّمُكُمْ. The hadith is in Sunan al-Nasa'i wa sahahahu al-Albani rahimahullah. He said sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the hadith of Abu Hurairah, أَنَا بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْوَالِدِ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْوَالِدِ أُعَلِّمُكُمْ. That I am like a father. I am the status of the father towards you. I teach you. This shows us that the teacher is also a father for a person. So every adab which we display towards our fathers, we also display towards our teachers. And normally, as I said, this would be sufficient. But when people lost even adab with their parents, then with their teachers, even more. He said, وَالْتَزِمْ تَوْقِيرَ الْمَجْلِسِ, and also abide by the etiquettes of the gathering and respecting the gathering. Now we mentioned how a person sits, where a person sits. All of this is from the adab of the sitting. Why? Because it is a gathering of قال الله قال الرسول. It's a gathering in which angels are above us, inshaAllah. And therefore these gatherings, they require adab. So is it from adab that people are leaning against the wall? Is it from adab that people are sitting at the back, lying down, resting against something? Is it from adab that a person extends his legs? Or whilst the shaykh is talking, he's drinking, using the mobile phone, chewing gum, eating something? Is it from adab that a person leaves without permission? Now, even this, if a person needs to leave, and sometimes it happens that a person needs to leave, he raises his hands. Or he makes a symbol, and can I leave, so the teacher understands, and the teacher gives him permission. And this used to also be mentioned when it came to entering into the gathering. Jamal ad-Din al-Qasimi rahimahullah, he has a risala called Adab al-Daris wal-Mudarris, the etiquettes of the teacher and the etiquettes of the learner. And he mentions some of these adab and the adab of the gathering. And from the adab of the gathering is, just as you don't leave the gathering without permission, you raise your hands and you seek permission for leaving. Even when it comes to entering, if you enter late, you enter with permission. So this is how it would be at the time of the Salaf. That before they sat down, they would excuse themselves, they would seek permission, and then they would sit down. But then, because of a lack of adab, we see people leaving whenever they want, entering whenever they want, for the smallest excuse, leaving, not knowing how to sit down, not bringing books, all of this. And it's not about the gathering or even the person, it's about the knowledge of the person. And why do we respect a Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah? Why do we respect him? I don't know him, I never met him, I don't know what he looks like, I never spoke to him, but I respect him for his knowledge. So these adab are in reality out of respecting the knowledge which the shaykh or the gathering it contains. He said, وَإِظْهَارَ السُّرُورِ مِنَ الدَّرْسِ وَالْإِفَادَةِ بِهِ. And also from the adab is a person showing happiness and enthusiasm that he is listening and benefiting, learning. So even this is from adab. Even in how you display your mood and the enthusiasm you show, all of this is from adab. So we don't sit in the gatherings of knowledge as if we're bored or we don't want to be there, or it's a social gathering. Rather, writing down, taking notes, benefiting, asking questions where it's appropriate, being happy to attend, focused when learning. All of these are from the adab. And then he spoke, rahimahullah, about what are the correct adab if the shaykh or the teacher makes a mistake. And these mistakes are different levels. So, first of all, you have to know that what you consider to be a mistake is in fact a mistake. It might be the case that you think the shaykh is mistaken, but you have misunderstood it incorrectly. Secondly, even if you consider it to be a mistake, but does the shaykh have some evidence? And his tarjih, is it based upon some evidence which justifies that which he is saying, which you consider to be incorrect, but the shaykh has evidence for that which he is saying? If that mistake has been communicated to you, has that communication been correct? How many times are statements narrated and people exaggerate in what the Shaykh said? Or they add a context and the Shaykh never meant that context. Naam. So even first verifying that which has been narrated, that which has been communicated, has it been communicated accurately? And then the type of mistake. And was it a slip of the tongue? For example, the Shaykh was meant to say قال Allah and recite an ayah, and he said قال Rasul and he recited an ayah. Of course, he didn't mean to say that. It's just a slip of the tongue. Naam. So mistakes are different types. Also, you have to look at the gathering as well. So in some situations, it's better for that mistake to be rectified there and then. For example, if the Shaykh mentioned a point which was incorrect and the lesson is being recorded, and if the Shaykh does not rectify that mistake, that slip of the tongue, even if it's unintended, that recording's gone out. So there with adab, it's better for the mistake to be pointed out with adab. Naam. So even in wording, you don't say, Shaykh, you were wrong when you said this and this. Shaykh, I think, or our Shaykh, I think you meant this when you said this. Naam. Or correcting the mistake quietly as opposed to out loud. Or writing down on a piece of paper as opposed to correcting it in public. Naam. Unlike this. So the point is that even when it comes to rectifying a mistake, correcting a mistake, you look at the type of gathering, you look at the type of audience, you look at the type of mistake which is being made, and all of these things are done with complete adab. So he said, إِذَا بَدَى لَكَ خَطَأٌ مِنَ الشَّيْخِ أَوْ وَهْمٌ فَلَا يُسْقِطْهُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَيْنِكَ. Firstly, even if a mistake or a misunderstanding from the Shaykh has occurred, then this does not diminish his status. Because perfection is for whom? For Allah Azza wa Jal. There is no book which has been authored after the Quran, and the Quran was not authored, it was revealed. But there is no book which has been authored after the Quran except that it contains some mistakes. Because al-Izza lillah, perfection is for Allah alone. And there is no person after the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam except that he makes mistakes. And look at the madhab of al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. He has two forms of his madhab. Al-madhab al-qadim or al-madhab al-jadid. The old madhab and the new madhab. And in his new madhab, in his fatwa later on, they differ from his ahkam and his fatwa from previous. Why? Because he's a human being. At that time, he considered certain things to be correct, and later on, as he grew, as he learnt, as he became aware of more evidences, he changed his view. Al-Imam Ahmad, in the madhab, you will find riwayat. On the same issue, there may be 2 or 3 views of Al-Imam Ahmad on the same issue. On the first issue, he said it is wajib. On the second issue, he said it is mustahab. In the first fatwa, the first riwayah, he said it is disliked. And then in the second fatwa, in the second riwayah, he said it is haram. He said it is legislated, it is not legislated. Why? Because Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he sat for over 25 years giving fatwa. Do you think in those 25 years that he's not going to change his views? He's not going to learn, he's not going to develop, he's not going to become aware of more evidences and learn more? So as time developed, throughout those 25, 30 years of him sitting, teaching, giving fatwa, different riwayat became prominent. None of this diminishes the status of the teacher or the Shaykh. Naam, if he makes a mistake in an ayah, this does not diminish the status of the Shaykh because he's a human being. If one of his statements contradicted a previous statement, this does not diminish the status of the Shaykh in our eyes because they are human beings. He said, وَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْجُو مِنَ الْخَطَإِ سَالِمًا. Because who is free from error? Who is free from mistake? He said, وَحْذَرْ أن تعامله بما يضجره. And be cautious of interacting with the Shaykh in a manner which irritates the Shaykh. Naam, with everything which has been mentioned previously. وَمِنْهُ مَا يُسَمِّيهِ الْمُوَلَّدُونَ حَرْبُ الْأَعْصَابِ. حَرْبُ الْأَعْصَابِ, I think in the English, is translated as battle of the nerves. Now, as if the student is there to contend and compete with the Shaykh. Let's see who blinks first. Naam, when constantly back and forth, let's see who gives up first. We don't speak to our fathers like this. We don't speak to our teachers like this. Sometimes you tanazul, you let go of your view, you let go of your right, you stand down from, and you leave your stubbornness, you put your ego to the side because he's your father, he's your Shaykh, this is your mother, this is your teacher. So we don't have this harbul a'sab, let's see who blinks first, the battle of the nerves. بمعنى امتحان الشيخ على القدرة العلمية والتحمل. Also from Su'al Adab, and Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, he delves in this, is that before I take from my Shaykh, I'm going to test him. Let me ask him some hypothetical questions. Let me ask him some questions. Let me see if I can test him. This is Su'al Adab. So this is also to be avoided. وَإِذَا بَدَى لَكَ الْإِنْتِقَالُ إِلَى شَيْخٍ آخَرٍ. And let's say, if you're going to attend a different gathering, or you heard of a particular Shaykh and he has come to your locality, and you want to learn from that Shaykh, from adab with your Shaykh is فَاسْتَأْذِنْهُ بِذَلِكَ, that seek his permission. Seek his permission. It might be the case that he knows something about that speaker that you are not aware of, or he knows that that speaker or that Shaykh, he's not worthy of teaching, and he's not qualified, or he has errors in his aqeedah, or he has su'al adab. So from these various angles, from complete adab is that the Shaykh that you study with regularly, the one who you accompany in terms of the gatherings, and you make mulazama of his lessons, and then there is another lesson or another conference, or there is a Shaykh who attends, or you're moving from one locality to another locality, from adab, from the angle of adab, is you seek his permission and you ask his view. He said, فَإِنَّهُ أَدْعَى لِحُرْمَتِهِ, because adab to this level, it is more appropriate for the honourable status of the Shaykh. وَأَمْلَكُ لِقَلْبِهِ فِي مَحَبَّتِكَ وَالْعُطْفِ عَلَيْكَ. And also, this will cause your teacher to also respect you and have a form of affection and love towards you. That look at the adab of these students, even though I did not request, but they seek my opinion, they value my opinion, they value the gathering, they value, I have a status with them, and like this they have a status with me. He said, إِلَى آخِرِ جُمْلَةٍ مِنَ الْآدَابِ يَعْرِفُهَا بِالطَّبْعِ. And all the various adab that we should know by nature. As Muslims, we should know these adab. But unfortunately, many of these adab, they have been forgotten. Because your Shaykh, he has al-ubuwah ad-diniyah. He's your religious father. Just as your father is your biological father, then your teacher is your religious father. Like we mentioned from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, إِنَّمَا أَنَا بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْوَالِدِ أُعَلِّمُكُمْ. I am the level of your father, I teach you. And he said that some of them, they used to call this al-radha al-adabi, spiritual nourishment. Just as your father provides the rizq, meaning food, real food, then also your teacher is providing some form of food and nourishment. But it is a nourishment of the soul and a nourishment of al-adab. And he said, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ بِقَدْرِ رِعَايَةِ حُرْمَتِهِ يَكُونُ النَّجَاحُ وَالْفَلَاحُ. And you should know that according to your respect of your Shaykh is how much you will succeed in that knowledge. وَبِقَدْرِ الْفَوْتِ يَكُونُ مِنْ عَلَامَاتِ الْإِخْفَاقِ. And how much the status of your shaykh is diminished, then this is how much you will ultimately lose out when it comes to knowledge. And then finally, and we end with this, the Shaykh rahimahullah, he warned against the respect that is found with the mubtadi'ah, with the Sufiya, and with the non-Arabs who are not upon the Sunnah. He said, أعيذك بالله من صنيع الأعاجم والطرقية والمبتدعة الخلفية. He said, and I seek refuge by Allah for you. Meaning, I ask Allah to protect you from what? From the customs of the A'ajim. The A'ajim meaning the non-Arabs who are not upon the Sunnah. And At-Turuqiyya. The meaning of At-Turuqiyya, those deviated ghulat amongst the Sufiyya who follow those well-known turuq, the tariqas which they are known as, and the mubtadi'ah, and many of the innovators, in the adab which they think the sheikhs are deserving of, and the ghulu that we find nowadays with who they call awliya, who they call murshideen, who they call peer and sheikh, etc. He said, al-khudu' al-kharij an adab al-shar', showing a level of submission and humility which should only be shown to Allah Azza wa Jal. Standing and in front of a shaykh as if you're standing in salah. This is ibadah. Bowing down in front of a shaykh, prostrating in front of a shaykh. All of this khudu' is only for Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is not from the adab of a student towards the teacher. He said, min lahsil aidi, like the licking of the hands. And some of them, they go to an extreme level where they think that there is barakah and they make tabarruk upon the body of the shaykh. So they might lick the hand or touch him and then wipe themselves over their bodies with. All of this is from al-ghulu. He said, وَتَقْبِيلِ الْأَكْتَافِ, and also the kissing of the shoulders. وَالْقَبْضُ عَلَى الْيَمِينِ بِالْيَمِينِ وَالشِّمَالِ عِنْدَ السَّلَامِ, and also shaking hands with two hands. Sunnat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it is that a person shakes with one hand. The right hand meets the right hand. And this is how the Sahaba would interact with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And nowadays, in many cultures, especially amongst non-Arab cultures, you'll see the shaking shaking with two hands. And this is a form of respect. Of course, something like this is not a bid'ah and is not misguidance like the other things we mentioned, like making ruku, making sujood, showing submission and humility to that level. No, they do it from the angle of respect. So, while we don't say it's bid'ah, but what we can say is, look, the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ is better. And yes, in the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, the Messenger ﷺ, he took Ibn Mas'ud with both of his hands. And he held the hand of Ibn Mas'ud with both hands. And then he taught him the tashahhud. And the ulama, they mention that this was not from the angle of shaking hands, but he was holding him in order to teach him. Al-Muhim, and it's worth noting that a Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, he mentions that he said, إِذَا اعْتَادَ النَّاسِ أَنْ يَفْعَلُوا ذَلِكَ عِنْدَ السَّلَامِ فَلَا حَرَجْ. His view is, rahimahullah, that if the people have a culture that the student or the youngster or the son, he shakes the hands of his father or his teacher, and these are my words, I'm just explaining. If he uses two hands, he said, فَلَا حَرَجْ, that I don't see this to be a big problem. لِأَنَّهُ لَيْسَ فِيهِ نَهْيٌ, because there is no clear prohibition in saying don't shake with two hands. صحيح أن المصافحة باليد مع اليد فقط. It is correct that according to the Sunnah, the shaking, the musafa is done hand with a hand, the right hand with the right hand. This is the Sunnah. He said, لكن هذا من باب إظهار الشفقة والإكرام. He said, but this is done from the angle of respect, from the angle of humbleness. فَلَا نَرَى فِي ذَلِكَ بَأْسًا. He says, so we, meaning Ibn Uthaymin, we don't see a big problem in this. Naam. And there are other fatawa, the fatawa of Lajna al-Da'ima, Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, there are fatawa which says that this is inappropriate. And we say like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say, وَخَيْرُ الْهَدِي هَدْيُ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم. The best guidance is the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, we differentiate between a bid'ah which is being done and it has to be rebuked. It has to be corrected. And then certain cultural aspects which the opposite of them may be closer to the sunnah, but we don't say it's a bid'ah or it's a sin, or sometimes it can be overlooked. Na'am. Or if it's based upon a hadith, maybe the hadith, some ulama consider it to be authentic, others weaken it, but ultimately it's based upon some form of evidence. Yes, it can be clarified, but it's not rebuked. And we don't say that that person is an innovator because he's shaking hands with two hands. And you know that that person is doing it from the angle of respect and honoring the person. Al-Muhim, as I mentioned, this is the view of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin, and it was worth mentioning. He said, وَالْإِنْحِنَاءُ عِنْدَ السَّلَامِ, and also bowing down and lowering the head when it comes to salam. This is not respect. Naam, this is a form of al-ghulu. And also, referring to the Shaykh as if you're a slave, Ya Sayyidi, or my master. So in a culture in which Sayyidi refers to the relation between a slave and a master, then this should not be used. But sometimes there are other cultures, for example, Shaykh Bakr Abu Zayd, rahimahullah, he said Mawlaya, the word Mawlaya. And in our culture, this is similar to the word Mawlana or Mawlawi, meaning Mawlana means our Mawla. Mawlaya, or what we say Mawlawi, it means our Mawla. The meaning of Mawla here is your guide. And this isn't from the angle of shirk, because Allah is Mawla, Allah is the ultimate guide. But Mawlana in terms of our teacher, our murshid, our guide, our instructor, etc. So in certain cultures, the word Ya Sayyidi is just a form of respect. In fact, it's often translated as Mr. In English, when they use Mr. in Arabic, in some countries they use Sayyid Fulan, Sayyida Fulan. And similarly when it comes to Mawlana and Mawlaya, Naam. Al-Muhim, those things which are clearly wrong and are known by the innovated groups, we stay away from them. And other aspects which are more cultural, even if we say that it's further away from the sunnah, and it's better to be closer to the sunnah, like the shaking of two hands, you clarify, but we don't rebuke, and we don't consider those people to be innovators. Naam. And as a side benefit, the issue of wiping the face with your two hands after making dua. We know that from the adab of dua is to raise the hands. ثُمَّ يَمُدُّ يَدَيْهِ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. And then we find certain people, or some people, that they wipe their face after making dua. And I asked Shaykh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, hafidhullah, and he's from the most senior scholars of our time today, and he's the muhaddith of al-Madinah, well known and well respected, and he's the shaykh of many of the ulama who are now in al-Madinah. So I asked him about, first of all, is it correct to wipe the face with the hands after dua? And if it's not correct, if we see somebody doing that, should they be rebuked? And he mentioned, hafidhullah, that the wiping of the face with the hands after dua, this is based upon two hadith. And although he considers both a hadith to be da'if, weak, however, there are certain ulama, amongst them al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, who consider them to strengthen each other, and therefore they are hasanun li ghayrihi. Meaning there is some basis for doing it, even though the Shaykh himself, he considers them to be da'if. And this is also the view of Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. So he said, so then I said, okay, so should we rebuke? Should we correct? He said, tubayyin, clarify, but don't rebuke. Meaning, clarify if an opportunity arises, but don't disparage them. Don't hold them to be innovators just because they are wiping the hands over their face. The reason why I mentioned this example, because there are certain things we, sometimes even our masjid, our community, we consider to be a complete bid'ah, completely wrong. As if that's the difference between bid'ah and sunnah. And then when you look into it, you will see that those who do this, they have some imam or a shaykh or some evidence by which they are justifying their views. Even if we consider it to be marjuh, meaning it is not rajih, but the fact that they have some justification, or a great muhaddith like al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, and he has this view, then there has to be some leeway. And there has to be a difference between rebuking and criticizing and disparaging, and between advising and clarifying if there is an opportunity to do so. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا وسلم. And we'll continue on Tuesday with the rest of the chapter. وجزاكم الله خيرا.